So these equations are kind of quadratic-esque because you're going to solve them the same way that you would do a quadratic. You're going to use a zero property. So for this very first one, what would you do first before you can use the zero property? What do you have to do before you use zero property? It has to equal 0, students. You can't use a zero property if it doesn't equal 0. So I subtract 48x squared from both sides. And then I get 3x to the fourth minus 48x squared equals 0. Now, what would you do?
Take out the x.
Yes, you can take an x squared out of both of those. Can I take anything else out?
3.
A 3. Okay. Notice I did not divide both sides by x squared because I'm not doing inverse operations right now. What I'm doing is I'm factoring, so I can write it in factored form. And once I write it in factored form, then you can use the zero property. Oh man, what is that? Is that 16? X. Yes. No x anymore. Equals 0. So how'd that happen? I went 3 divided by 3, which is 1. And then I went x to the fourth divided by x squared, which is x squared. Then I went negative 48 divided by 3, which is negative 16. And then x squared divided by x squared is just 1, which is why there's no more x right here. And so this is what I took out, and this is almost fully in factored form. Now you can stop right here and solve it because you guys know how to use radicals. But can you factor this more right here?
Yes.
For sure. So you can factor this using difference of squares, and it would look like this: 3x squared, x minus 4, x plus 4. It doesn't matter which one you put first, the plus or the minus. And boom. Then you would set each of these factors equal to 0. We actually don't need to do that because you can set this equal to 0 and get your answers. Check it out. X squared minus 16 equals 0. You would add 16 to both sides. And then you would square root both sides. And you get x equals what?
4.
Plus or minus 4. Because whenever you're inside of an equation and you do a radical, a square root, then you must say plus or minus. You have to. It's a rule. Okay? And you should notice, hey, holy crap, that's the same answer that you would get if you did it like this. Right? Come on. Jumping ahead of me. Don't forget about this 3x squared. That factor also needs to be set equal to 0. 3x squared, when it's set equal to 0, you divide both sides by 3, you get x squared equals 0, and so x equals 0. So your answers are x equals the set of 0 and plus or minus 4. I probably should just write out the negative and the plus 4, but I don't want to. So that's your answer, but don't forget, you must check your answers. You must plug it in to check. Did I write something wrong? What's going on here? Okay, got a question. Okay, this one. All right, for the next one, since it has 4 terms, you would do something we call grouping. It's a strategy. You group the first 2 and group the last 2. You take what you can out of the first 2, and I could take an x squared out, and I'm left with x minus 3. And then you take what you can out of the second one, which is a 3. You get 3 and x minus 3 again. Okay, make sure you say plus 3. I didn't take out a negative 3. And what you have in the parentheses, you want to be the same. If they're not the same, then you cannot factor by grouping. And there are problems like that, where you can't factor by grouping. So we're going to take out of this whole thing an x plus 3. No, not plus 3, sorry, minus 3. So then, that would cancel out, and that would cancel out. So make sure you show that you take out an x plus or x minus 3, and then you write what you have left over. X squared plus 3 equals 0. All right, so now you have your 2 factors. There's extra stuff over here because I explained it when I paused it. And now I have x minus 3 equals 0, and then x squared plus 3 equals 0. Because that's what the zero property says. You can take each of the factors and then set them equal to 0, and then solve. The first one's no problem. That one equals 3. The second one, it's going to be x squared equals negative 3. What? Can you square root that? No, you can't. But we can write it with an I. Touche. So we have x equals plus or minus the square root of 3, and I put the I right there because I took out the negative. So I have this is.
Why would you need the plus or minus if it's going to be a negative anyway?
No. It's because whenever you square root, it's going to be a positive or a negative. What I did is I took out the I. Here, look. I could have written it like this, -3, but we can't have a negative inside of a radical, so we're going to write it like this.
And you can have a radical or a negative number inside a radical because it doesn't exist?
Right. We have to show that's imaginary.
Oh.
Now, depending on the question might ask how many real solutions there are. Now, how many real solutions are there for this one? There's one. This is not real. It's fake. It's imaginary.
Oh.
So there's one real solution. You ever wonder why that it says, like, why does it ask me if there's real solutions?
Yeah.
Well, that's because you could get an imaginary number. If you get an imaginary number, it's not a solution.
Then why do you care?
Okay, now I want to look at this guy that you might not be too fond of because he has an x to the 4th right there, and he has an x squared right there. Now, this is factorable. You always know because you would have the 4 or a number right there that can be divided by 2, and that'll be the exponent of the other one, and then you have your constant. Okay, you would factor this the same way you would factor something like x squared plus 10x plus 25. If you were to factor this, actually, let's not do those. Let's do 21. Okay, so this would be x plus 7 and x plus 3, right? Right? Okay, but if I were to multiply these, I would get x squared. I would not get x to the 4th. And actually, let's not write this one down. Write this one down. Go x squared minus 3x plus 2. That's like almost looks identical to this one. The coefficients are the same. Okay, so when I factor this one, I would get x minus 2 and x minus 1. Using the big X, what multiplies to give me the positive 2 and then adds to give me the negative 3? Well, that's negative 2 and negative 1. Now, if I multiply these two together, what would I get?
X squared.
X squared. You would not get x to the 4th. So, what do we have to do to change it?
X squared.
Yeah, if they're x squared. X squared times x squared is x to the 4th. Fantastic. And then we have the middle term. You see this middle term? Negative 3x squared. What's x squared times negative 1? Negative x squared. And then what is negative 2 times x squared? And if I add these two together, do I get that middle term? Yay! So we have x squared minus 2 and times x squared minus 1 equals 0. We didn't solve it yet. This says equals 0 and it says solve. We still have to find their solutions. So you set each of these equal to 0. You have x squared minus 2 equals 0 and x squared minus 1 equals 0. Add 2, add 2. X squared equals 2. X squared equals, no, not squared. X equals plus or minus radical 2. Because you'd have to square root both sides right here.
This is for that.
The second one, you would go plus 1, you get x squared equals 1. You square root both sides, you get x equals plus or minus 1. That one's nice because we can take the square root of 1. So here's our two solutions. Just make sure you guys get in the habit of plugging these in and checking them to see if they're correct.